Okay, so let's start with your math course. For this week, again, just to kind of help reiterate how to access all of these things, right? You want to be sure that you go to your dashboard. Now, in your dashboard, you might see a lot of these announcements pop up. And I know for a lot of students, what happens is they don't think that they can access their classes through the dashboard because they see all these announcements. You could close them by hitting the X on the top right. If I do this here, then it'll hide all of my announcements. I can access them later if needed from the menu and do the global announcements. But if you don't want to close them for any particular reason, you can go ahead and scroll all the way down and you'll see your classes. Again, most of you should have 3 courses. You should have your computer course, you should have your Math 101 and your English 101 course as well. Now, again, if you had a class transferred over, that would have been done right before orientation, and you would already know. Now, like I've said before, to access all of your content, you would have to go into your modules, right? So you go into your modules, and again, we're going to start with the math first. For this week, we're starting with chapter 3 and going over chapter 4 as well. In chapter 3, again, all of these here are PowerPoints for you. They're not required readings, but if you are given a section, for example, if you're told to go through chapter 3.5 and you're having issues, there's a couple of things you can do. You can look at these PowerPoints and just select the one that you're having issues with and maybe getting some overview of what to look for. Now, once you do that, again, that's a pretty good option too. The other option that I would recommend is using the math videos. Again, this is in your modules in the third box down. So you have your getting started, your textbook, and then you have the math videos. If you click on this and you hit load math videos, if you for whatever reason, if you get this pop-up blocked, just make sure that you click on the little icon that says pop-up blocked and make sure that you allow all pop-ups from Pearson. So here, when you get this pop-up, the cool thing with this is that you can go ahead and select the chapter. Like for now, for example, we're doing adding and subtracting fractions, right? So we can go ahead and select chapter 3. From here, if you want to, you can select the section. So for example, if I wanted to do 3.5, I select this, and over here, you want to select section video lectures. Now I can hit find now, and you'll see that these links pop up at the bottom. So before I click this, let me show you once more how to do this. You go into your modules, the third box down, where it says math videos. You can go ahead and click this, open or press on this button. And then here, again, select the chapter that you want to work with. Don't do all chapters because then you're going to get too many links and it'll become confusing. So just select the chapter that you want an overview of. From here, you can select the section. And then again, we're looking to select section video lectures. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And from here, I can go ahead and click find now. Now, when you're looking at these links here, the one that you really just want to pay attention to is the one with the timestamp here. All the videos, the timestamps are the full length video. If you look at these smaller ones down here, these are just sections of this video. Like you see, it says objective A, B, C, and D. This is helpful when you're looking at your math homework because you'll see at the top of each exercise set, each grouping, you'll see that they're broken down by objectives as well as, of course, like their numbers, but they have all their objectives and it'll tell you too what examples to look for, and I'll show you that in a bit. But when you click on this link, again, if you have your pop-ups blocked, you may not see this, so you want to allow all the pop-ups from Pearson. You hit play, and for now, let's see, it's muted, so I'm going to hit play. And again, you get great videos. These are free. They're of no charge to you. You can just watch these over and over. And you see where that we have these little line breaks. This is like a small testing point for you to make sure that you know what objective you're in and what to do. You can always speed these up, slow these down, rewind them, fast forward, whatever you want to help you. But I think these videos are a great tool to help you if you need some sort of instruction on doing your math problems, because most of them will be exactly like this, and some of them will be pretty close, but they're great tools. I recommend looking at these because, again, they give you the definitions of some of the objectives that you'll be going over and a few other things too. Okay, so that's how you access those videos. Now, back in my math class in the modules, I want to go ahead and get my math textbook open so I'm ready for my homework. So while that loads, let's go to week 2. Again, by now, you should have already completed everything for week 1. If you haven't, please be sure that you get that in as soon as possible. And remember that your attendance is incredibly important, and it's super reliable on getting your assignments in on time. So for this week, again, we have these 3 assignments. We have your practice exercises. There's 2 of them, one on chapter 3 and one on chapter 4. And then you have your week 2 discussion exercise. And like before, like last week, these 2 are both, think of them like small test quizzes, and they're just practice quizzes in a way, right? So when you do this one, for example, on chapter 3, and this is the same for your chapter 4 practice exercise, there's no time limit, and you get 2 attempts. So again, when you're trying these out, for example, if I were to go ahead and start my test, you can see how many questions you have. You have 20 questions, 1 point each. And for these, you don't have to show your work, but it's good to write down your work and see where you're stuck on, so then you can review those for your notes later, because again, your discussions kind of, rely on some of this knowledge, and it's good practice for your midterm. Again, all of these quizzes will be helping you prepare you for your midterm and then for your final too. So take down your notes, write these down as if you're struggling with some. If there are some that you are struggling with, again, you can meet with our math tutor at math@cnicollege.edu, and he'll be able to help you out. So for example, you'll get a problem like this, right? So it tells you to solve, and it says last week Samantha ran 11 miles. This week she ran 9 2/3 miles. So how much more did she run last week, right? So there's various ways you can do this. And again, you don't have to show your work for these. And it's everything. If you're like, well, where do I even do this? Again, it tells you up here what chapter it's from. It's chapter 3. So if you're still stuck with this, then let's go to chapter 3. And when you get your book, over here on the top left, you'll get your table of contents. I can go ahead and select that. And here you'll see 3, and it says adding and subtracting fractions. Knowing that already, guess what we have to do here? And your quiz here, we have to do subtraction to get what we need, right? And in order for you to start figuring those out, you can look at some of these sections. For example, you can look at, let's say if we go over 3.1. Look at your examples. Your examples in this math book are incredibly helpful. They're probably some of the best in terms of giving you clear-cut examples on what to do. It gives you some good imagery on how to look at your fractions too. I know fractions scare a lot of students, and I know it's a hard point on, I don't even know how to visualize fractions. Like, can I just turn it into a decimal? You can, and you'll come across that later. But for now, we just want to be sure that you know how to approach fractions. So like this one right here, it says adding like fractions, right? Now, when it tells you like fractions, you have to have something here, what we call, your same denominator, right? And usually it's your lowest common denominator. And here, your unlike fractions are when you have your denominator, which is the number at the bottom, different. So again, your number at the top over here is your numerator, and then you have your denominator here at the bottom. And generally, when you want to add and subtract, you need to have the denominator the same so you can actually go across. When it comes to multiplying and division, which we'll get to later in a bit, but those, it doesn't really matter too much because you can just go ahead and multiply across, and you'll see when we do divisions, we can actually flip one of the fractions so we can still multiply. But here, for example, you get 1/5 fifth, right? And then you get 2/5. When you're adding them, all you're going to do is put these two colored blocks together, just like this. And it's a good representation of what we're looking at. But in reality, all you're doing is once you get the common denominator, like we have here, 5, then these can just go across. So you don't have to worry about this once it's all the same. So again, when you're looking for your homework assignments, you'll have to go towards the end of the chapter, and you're looking for this. This is what you're looking for here, is this exercise set. That's how you know this is your homework. When you see some problems with this green play button, guess what that means? That means that you can actually view these exact problems in those videos that I showed you. So if you're given this number 1 problem, your homework assignment will be there so you can actually see how to do it. Now, if your problem is like number 2 or number 3, guess what? These are all solved the same way. So just because you're like, well, I don't have a play button, that's not fair. Well, in actuality, it's still the same thing. You just have to take that concept and just change the numbers, because you're already given here, in a way, it's pretty easy. It's already giving you the same denominator, which means that you can go ahead and add across. Just be sure that we're not just adding here, we're also simplifying. So this is something in math that you need to pay attention to, is that you're not just going to solve. Sometimes you might need to simplify too. And there are times where it will tell you you don't need to simplify. So just keep that in mind. But it tells you here too, the other key thing to look at in your textbook, it says see examples 1 through 3. That means too, if you don't want to watch the videos and you're like, well, I just prefer to read it, right? Because some of us are, we either just want to read the textbook, not watch the videos. Like I said during orientation, sometimes for me, videos can be distracting, and reading it is a good way to, for me at least, pick up the information. So if you're like that too, you can go back into these examples earlier in the chapter, and you'll be able to find how to solve these. Right? So again, you're just looking for your number. And if you're still like, well, I don't know what my number is, you should have already seen your number. You can always access your number here in the announcements of your math course. So once you're in the math course, on the top left, you can click on announcements, and you'll see here, this one here by Ms. Dempsey, it says discussion question assignment numbers. Now, I know some of you also told me that you couldn't click on the announcements. If you're clicking on the text down here, it's not going to work. What you need to do is click on this text up here, like the title. Once you click that, then you will see your number. Again, this is just one section. So this is Math 101-1. So you may not see your name if you're in the second section, and that is totally fine. We just put you in 2 different sections because it just makes it easier. So again, if I was Gusan, then I would be number 1. If I was Elias, then I would be number 2, right? And so on and so forth. That number that you have will be your number for the rest of the term. So write that number down somewhere. You can put it on a sticky note and put it on your laptop, and that's how you know that that is your number there. So again, you go to your announcements. Right now, it's currently the 3rd announcement here. So again, to click on these, just click on the title. Look for your name, and carefully look for your name. Some people tell me sometimes that they don't find their name here either. And again, just look closely, and you'll see here, for example, like Joshua is number 5. And this, you can keep doing that. Now that I know my number, I can go back into the modules. And if I scroll down here again, and now I can do my week 2 discussion. Again, we're in week 2 currently. And then here, I would look for my assigned numbers. So again, if I was number 1, then these are the homework assignments that I would have to do. And you can see there are 3 problems. So I have section 3.4, number 61, 3.5, number 50, and 4.3, number 19. On top of this too, again, just with like any other class you may have been in before or anything else, if you want to prepare best for your midterms and finals, don't just do the assigned homework too. Study outside of what you're given, because again, you can see here you're only given sections 3.4, 3.5, and 4.3, at least for these numbers on top. But your midterm's going to cover everything. So you might want to look at through those PowerPoints. You might want to skim through some of your sections, your other sections. And again, make sure that you're doing those practice exercises because again, not only is that homework, but those help you get like an overview of everything else that you may have missed that you didn't do for your discussions. So let's stick with this really fast. If my assigned number is 1 and I have section 3.4 number 1 as one of my problems, then I would need to go into my textbook. Here, again, I have 3.461. So let me go into my table of contents, go to section 3.4. And then here, I can look for my problem, right? So let's see. This is here all the way on page 210. Again, in your vital source book, at the bottom right, you will see your page number here. It's 210. And again, I'm given number 61, I believe. I'll double check in a second. And always double check your numbers. Sometimes some students will accidentally do the wrong one. So make sure it is on your line. And like here, I'm number 1, so I have 61 as my problem. Now I'm going to go ahead and look for that problem, which is here. So I know it's here, but let's look at the instructions for these sections here. For this one, it's telling me to solve for exercises 649 through 50. Solutions have been started for you. And then again, we can go ahead and solve these. I think it's just solving the problems. Now, like I was saying before, if you're like, okay, well, this is a long word problem, how do I even get started? If you look on the page before all of these word problems, you'll see that you have the play button on number 53. Again, this is something that can help you review at least one problem, and you can approach it the same way that you would for your given number. Like here for this problem, for example, it says the longest floating pontoon bridge in the United States is the Evergreen Point Bridge in Seattle, Washington. It is 2,526 yards long. The second longest pontoon bridge in the United States is the Lacey V. Murrow Memorial Bridge, also in Seattle. And it is 2,206 2/3 yards long, right? How much longer is the Evergreen Point Bridge than the Lacey V. Murrow Memorial Bridge? And it shows you here where it's getting this information from, right? So it looks like a lot, but in reality, you're just given 2 sets of numbers. You're given this one here, and you're giving this here. Now this, you're like, well, how do I, how do I do this fraction thing? Well, if you're looking at your homework, and if you're going through your chapter, you'll see something called mixed numbers. And again, mixed numbers is generally when you have your, let me show you here. In week 2, we have our adding and subtracting mixed numbers. This is in 3.4, right? So we can look at this PowerPoint. And here you can see, let's go ahead and make this full screen, how to solve some of these. So it tells you here, for example, we have this, we're trying to add 12 and 5/12 plus 4, 1/6, right? But what we actually want to do is turn them into a mixed number. So let's see here, actually. I want to see how we can, if there's a better way to do this. Let's look at your textbook. So again, don't just try to do the problems. You could if you think you know it, but look at the examples. These do help you a ton. And again, we're going to be looking at this right here. Let's look at subtracting mixed numbers, right? So we have, and actually I want to see something that's similar to yours, or this one problem. Here we go. Example 6, subtract 12 minus 8 and 3/7. So here's our solution, right? Again, these are good steps on trying to solve this. So 12 is equal to 11 7/7, right? Because we know that your numerator, if it's the same number as your denominator, that actually equals 1, right? So that is a 1. Then we have here minus 8 and 3 over 4, because again, these are the two numbers. Now your book does them this way. You don't have to do them this way. You can still try to find another way to solve them. That's the cool thing about math, right? You can solve them different ways. But for the sake of this assignment here, they do it this way because then it helps you to easily kind of see the numbers like one on top of the other. And here, what they did is they borrowed 1 from the 12 and wrote it as 7 over 7, which is still the same number. Now here, and it just makes it easy so they can also do the mixed numbers. So then here you can see we have 7 and we have 7 down here, right? So both of the denominators are like fractions. So which is the same number, which is makes it easy when we're trying to subtract. Now I can go ahead and subtract 11 from 8, which is 3, 7 from the 3, which is 4, and we keep the denominator the same. And then here's our answer. We get subtract the whole numbers, right? So we get 3 and 4 over 7. And that is how we can solve those. Now here, again, you're going to see more of your problems that you saw, like those word problems. It shows you how to solve it. And again, it helps you walk it through. But if you need some more in-depth help with these math problems, then again, please reach out to our math tutor at math@cnicollege.edu. He is available Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 10 a.m. through 4 p.m. So reach out. But once you do your problem, remember, you're doing 3. You're going to go ahead and post your post your problem here. So just like the student did, right? They did 3.4 number 17 and they wrote it out on a piece of paper. Something that I also recommend is if you don't want to write it out on a piece of paper, you can use this app here. Like this is something that I was showing students yesterday. Is this application is called Excalidraw. It's free to use. It's web-based. And like here, this is one of the homework assignments that one of the other programs was doing, and I was showing them how to do it on here too. But you can do it this way. You can write out the problem, and you can show your steps on how you're solving it, because that's the whole point of these math discussions. Is we're not just, it's not like your English class where you have to write everything out. There's not a prompt given to you. You're given 3 problems and you have to show your work. You can't just give the answer and expect to get full credit, because we need to see how you're thinking and you're problem solving each of these problems that you're given. We want to see your solutions. We want to see how you think. We want to see how it travels. And it's good practice. Again, it's good practice. But just like the student, they did their problem here. They're adding these fractions. And then, this is the next step. And here we go. So I would recommend, if you can, making these a little more easier to kind of read. If you want, you can write out some steps. So for example, here, you can say, okay, well, one of the first things we did is, since we have a division and a subtraction, what do you think we want to do? This is something that you have covered already, is you want to follow your order of operations, right? So you have to do your division first. So the first step is to divide 32 by 4, then we get 8. And then we bring the 3 down. So you see, this is why I have this arrow here. Then we get 8 minus 3, because I got the 8 from this. And this is, essentially, this is like your little third step here. And we get 5. Now, that is how I would show my work for that problem. Now, when you're checking your work, or when you want to provide a response, let's look at the directions up here, right? It's a step 1. At the start of the term, you were assigned a number. Again, you should already know where they are in your announcements. And for your initial post, you're going to type or insert your screenshot of the problem, just like you saw below. And again, your response should demonstrate all the problem solving steps. So, and your skills and everything too. So do not just leave it with an answer and that's it, because again, you won't get the full credit. The second thing you do is, as you already know, is to provide your 2 peer responses. And again, at least 2. You can provide more. And like it states here, simply congratulating your peers on a fantastic job or this looks good isn't enough. You need to provide some depth to your response. My recommendation, and as you can see here, is you can help your classmates clarify something if you saw that maybe they did it a little too long. Maybe you see that they made a mistake. If you catch anybody making a mistake in math, don't don't approach it in a negative way, right? Everybody makes mistakes. Just say, hey, I noticed that you somehow got a minus here or a negative rather than using division or something, and then help them solve it. Like check their work, right? That's the best way you can provide a response. And you'll see that here. For example, we have Raimundo here, did his 3 problems, good, right? This looks great. Now you have Carson, and what they did is they went ahead and checked all 3 problems. And the good thing that they did here for checking is that they actually provided some steps. It's a lot more visible, and they were able to see that everything went well. One thing that I would probably add is maybe a little sentence or two if you want to provide some description for what you did. Again, you don't need to, but I would. It helps provide some depth to that conversation. But checking your peer's homework assignment is the best thing you can do to get your full credit for those peer responses. So again, you can see a lot of students are already doing it well, right? And if you don't know how to do these screenshots, there are a few ways you can do these. You can either take a picture with your phone, email it to yourself. If you have an iPhone, you can airdrop it to your math book. If you have any mobile device, and most of you, all of you should have cell phones, I think, download the Canvas student app, just like we talked about in orientation. You download the Canvas student app, and once you're in there, you can go ahead and go into your dashboard, find your math course, go to your discussion, and hit reply. And once you hit reply there, you can go ahead and attach a photo or take a picture directly through your phone that will add to the discussion board. So there are various ways you can do this. But as you can see here, this is, and your instructor does a fantastic job of providing you at least like a quick overview of what you need to do here. So something he also writes is, describe some of the practical applications for fractions in your daily life. What are some of the challenges you have experienced in your past when trying to learn how to write or work with fractions? Then explain your answers. So on top of you writing your answers, something else your instructor wants is look for his prompt and see and add like a few sentences on, like here, for example, for this discussion, is he wants you to also talk about some challenges that you've personally experienced when trying to work with fractions. Now, I know most students, about like 90% or more, just don't like using fractions because they've had issues in the past. It just doesn't click or it just doesn't make sense. And again, so note that down and then try to explain some of your answers. And you can explain them just like this, right? These are good ways of you explaining your answers, is showing each of these steps. So again, let's kind of recap again what we have to do for math. For math this week, all you have to do are these 2 practice exercises. Again, they both have 20 questions each, 1 point each. You get 2 attempts and there's no time limit. And then in your discussion for this week, it's working on both chapters 3 and 4, just like you can see here. And again, the whole point is to get you to show your work and also, provide some response to your instructor's question that he has. And then again, your initial post is due by Wednesday before 11:59, and your peer responses, which are you checking the math homework of your peers, is due by Friday before 11:59. Again, I had some students telling me that they just didn't even do most of these things, or that they were late on some of the stuff. Again, it's the same. The due dates are always going to be the same each week. Your initial post by Wednesday before 11:59, or by 11:59 before midnight, and your peer responses again every Friday. So that is your math. Now, the other thing that I'm going to go over is your English course. So let me quit out of this here. Now for English, let's get started on your English class. Just like with anything, again, you go into your modules, you look for your English course, you can scroll all the way down, and then, or you can hit courses. If you hit courses here on the left side, you'll be able to see the classes that you're enrolled in. Once you're in your English class, you can go ahead and hit modules. And from here, again, if you scroll towards the bottom, go to week 2. If you're finished with week 1 in any of your classes, you can go ahead and hit this right here, and it'll hide it for you. It's a drop-down menu, and it'll collapse it, making it easier for you to kind of just go through everything. Now, just like with what we talked about in the math class, these right here are just PowerPoints. Again, it's not required reading, but they're useful resources, and I strongly recommend that you look at these because all this, everything you see here will be in your midterm and your final in some capacity. Now, the assignments. You have these 3 assignments. You have your 2 discussion posts and you have your review exercise. And just like with your math class, the review exercise, you have no time limit and you have 2 attempts. For example, in this one, you only have 5 problems. All of these will require you to identify and correct the capitalization errors, right? For example, like this one here, it says, identify the statement that demonstrated the correct capitalization. So you would have to look through these and see, okay, well, which ones are, again, look at the question. It's saying the correct, right? This is something that you should learn to do when you're taking tests, is read the instructions carefully, because oftentimes students will hit an answer and then they look at the instructions afterwards and they're like, oh, well, I got it wrong because I didn't read the instructions right. So we're looking for the correct capitalization. Now here, by looking at all of these, we can see that the correct one is going to be this one here, right? Because we have the Bainbridge Bass Club, and it's sponsoring a fishing tournament. And then we have the name of the lake, right? So these 2 right here, because these are 2 names of things, these are capitalized. Carefully look through everything. If you just select this one and you try to move on right away, you're going to get this one wrong because lake, or the L in lake, is not capitalized right. So you're going to do this for all 5. And again, if you need help with your writing and your English class, we do have a writing and English tutor as well, and you can reach out to her at writing@cnicollege.edu. I'll post another announcement with this video as well, with your tutoring services, so you can get some help if needed. By now, since it's week 2, you should have at the very least started covering some APA strategies with your instructors. So they should have at least given you the bare basics in your computer class of APA. If you haven't yet, then you should be going more in depth into that by next week, since you're starting to do your submission of topic assignments. And again, you can always reach out for help with those. But for this week, week 2 in your English class, we already went over the review exercise. Again, your review exercises and your practice exercises are due by Sundays before midnight. I would recommend getting started with your discussions first, since those are due earlier in the week, and then move on to your review exercises. So let's go over the first discussion for your English class. So here we have 3 parts, and it's going over common sentence errors, paragraph patterns, and the illustration paragraph. In part 1, you're asked, what types of common sentence errors do you tend to make in your own writing? Incorrect use of verbs, improper subject-verb agreement, and inconsistent tense are some examples of common sentence errors. What strategies can you use to spot and correct these types of errors in your own writing, right? So, like here, for example, it says, what types of common sentence errors do you tend to make in your own writing? Again, this is asking about your own personal writing and your personal experiences with this. It's not asking you to look something up. The only thing you might want to look up if you don't know what they are the types of common sentence errors, right? So these are like things like comma splicing. These are things like too many simple sentences, run-on sentences, etc. Now it says here, incorrect use of verbs, improper subject-verb agreement, and inconsistent text or tense are some examples of common sentence errors. So you can also use these too. Now, this is a big one that I see with most writing is inconsistent text. Tense is Example, like if you say, I went hiking, biking, and then I ate my meal or something like that, right? When the tense isn't making sense, like if you're using all past tense, but then you use something that's present tense, or using all present tense, but then you switch to past, it doesn't make sense. You have to keep the tense consistent in your writing. Now here it says, what strategies can you use to spot and correct these types of errors? So if you look at your book, let's pull up our English book here. You'll be able to see some things that you can work on, right? Because you're given some examples of common sentence errors. So the cool thing with your book too, your ebook, is that we can actually go ahead and click on this magnifying glass and we can type in what we're looking for. So let's see if it pops up. Here we go. So here we put common sentence and we're given a few things, right? We can already see here it says common sentence errors theme, and this is just showing us something else. Here, let's click on this. And then from here, and we're looking at psychology as a theme, right? So we're looking at fragments. Now, you can go ahead and do some research in your book and see, again, read some of these examples. You don't need to read every single thing, but you can read some examples of some common sentence errors. The other thing I would recommend is, let's look at some common sentence error examples. We can also look these up too. Now here, let's look at this first option. Here, like it says agreement errors, right? So a subject must agree in number with the verb. So here we have a singular subject, a singular verb, or you have a plural subject and a plural verb. So note the subject agreement errors often occur when the subject and verb are separated in the sentence. So let's look at this. Repetition and parallelism, like metaphors, presents itself not only in the text, but in the aesthetic of the poems. And then we have here the rhythm of the children's movements created by heartbeats and alliteration give this memory a nursery rhyme quality. Let's actually see if I can find something that's a little, sometimes some of these provide better visuals. And let's take a look at this. Here we go. I like this one. So again, we're looking at fragments, but we're looking with a subordinate clause. Like here's the error. I sent Bobby to the store because we'd run out of milk, right? This is not correct. I know people speak like this, but just remember, just because you speak a certain way, it doesn't mean it's necessarily quote unquote correct, right? There's like proper English, and this is what we're looking for in this class. Here's the correct way to do it or say it. I sent Bobby to the store because we'd run out of milk, right? So what you're seeing here is they actually combined these two sentences. These are simple sentences here. And again, these are fragments, right? This is one piece of a sentence and this is another. But the issue here is because we'd run out of milk. If this was left by itself, you wouldn't know why they're starting with because we'd run out of milk. And here's one more example for this. People seek counseling when they are experiencing difficulty coping with aspects of their lives. So again, if we were just to look at this part here, it wouldn't make any sense. But this is the correct way. We just combine them. People seek counseling when they are experiencing difficulty coping with aspects in their lives. So again, we can see that. Now, what strategies can you use to spot and correct these types of errors? Something personally that I would recommend is reading it out loud. And when you're looking at fragments, when you're looking at past or like issues with tense, again, it's good to kind of look at, if you're reading it out loud, you'll be able to catch these because you'll be saying, okay, well, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't make sense. What can I do? So let's look at this comma splice, for example. Here, typical error. Inconvenient banking hours are now a thing of the past. Many branches now stay open until 5:30 p.m. weekdays, and some are open on Saturdays. And then here's the correct way. Inconvenient banking hours are now a thing of the past. Many branches now stay open until 5:30 p.m. weekdays, and some are open on Saturdays. So you can see here a period is separating the two independent clauses, meaning this is a good sentence by itself. And here we have this one by itself as well. Again, the comma splicing, or let's look at this one more here. He fell into a deep meditative state. His pulse slowed down to practically nothing. And the correct way to say this or write it is he fell into a deep meditative state, and his pulse slowed down to practically nothing here. So a comma and a coordinating conjunction join the two independent clauses. These are some things that you covered last week, and you should have kind of paid attention to that. And again, each week builds up on top of the last week, just like with your math class too. By skipping some things and by not paying attention to what you need, it's going to hurt you in the long run. As you're doing this stuff, it will prepare you to write better, especially when you're prepping for your final paper. So pay attention to what these are. So let's go back to our discussion here. So again, now we kind of talked about this a bit. Let's look at part 2 here, paragraph patterns. What are the 9 types of paragraph patterns? How are they different from each other? Then of the 9 types of paragraph patterns, which have you used or have not used in your own writing? Again, let's look at our textbook here. And we can look at paragraph patterns. Again, we already know there's 9. So let's see what we have. Here we go. So let's look at these here. This is on page 177 of your text. So again, we have illustration, narration, description, process, definition, classification, comparison and contrast, cause and effect, and argument. These are your paragraph patterns. And the cool thing with this one here is that it shows you the purpose of each of these patterns. For example, we have illustration, which is to prove a point using specific examples, right? We have narration, which is to tell a story about a sequence of events that happened. Then we have description, which is to portray something using vivid details and images that appeal to the reader's senses. And remember, your senses mean touch, taste, smell, feel, all of those, right? Then we have process, to inform the reader about how to do something, how something works, or how something happened. And in definition is to explain what a term or concept means by providing relevant examples. For example, in your definition, this is something that you're going to get very used to when you're doing your Bio 201 class, because guess what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to define all of your key terms for your homework in that class. Then we have classification, is to sort a topic to help readers understand different qualities about the topic. And you have comparison and contrast, is to present information about similarities, which is comparing, or differences, which is contrasting. And then finally, actually not finally, we have 2 more. Cause and effect is to explain why an event happened, which is the cause, or what the consequences of the event were, which is the effects. And again, there are there's affects with an A, and there's effects with an E. So make sure you know the differences between those two as well. And then you have argument, to take a position on an issue and offer reasons for your position. One thing to know and to keep in mind is that try to remember these and write these down somewhere, because these will pop up in your midterm and your final. That's just a good heads up. You'll have to know what these are, because you're going to be asked about these paragraph patterns and how to use them. Sometimes you'll be given like a sentence and ask, okay, well, what type of paragraph pattern are we seeing? Not a sentence, a paragraph. And you'll be asked, what kind of paragraph pattern are you seeing? Are you seeing a narration? Are you seeing a definition, etc.? So now that we see those there, it says, what are the 9 types of paragraph patterns? Right now, you know what they are. How are they different from each other? Again, provide some small examples of how you would use these compared to one another. Then of the 9 types of patterns, which have you used and which have you not used? So if you look at these, most of you have probably used all of them without you even knowing that you use them, right? When you're going to, I don't know, like for example, if you're looking for a pet, right? You're probably going to look between a dog or a cat. Those are the most common pets. Maybe you want to stick with dogs. Well, you can start classifying the type of dogs, right? Again, classification helps you see the different qualities of that subject or topic. So you can say, okay, well, these are the different breeds, these are the different sizes. There's a variation of things that you can look for and start classifying your needs. Or you can look at the comparison and contrast, right? When a lot of people like use this when they're thinking about food, and trying to look for what to get to eat. It's like, well, let's compare and contrast like Raisin Canes and what's the other chicken place? I'm trying to blank right now. I don't know, El Pollo Loco or can't think of the.
Chick-fil-A.
There you go, Chick-fil-A. I don't know why I couldn't think of that one, but yeah, say you're trying to draw a comparison contrast between all those three, right? You can say, well, I've had all their chicken sandwiches, they're all made this way, which is you just compare and contrast. Again, there's various ways. Like we use these all to tell a story. Like narration is something that many people do when they're at work, when they're at home, etc. Right? You're like, okay, well, oh man, you wouldn't believe what happened this morning when before getting to work. I saw this car accident. All these people were getting out. Then the ambulance came, right? You're telling that in a sequence, right? A sequence of events that happened. That is when you're narrating a story. So again, many people use everything here. You just probably don't know that you're doing it, or you don't know what it's called, but you know you've done it, right? Especially a process when you're talking to somebody at work on how something works. It's just like, oh, well, you got to turn this on first, then you do this, then you do that. Again, that is a process. Then finally here we have the illustration paragraph here, or part 3, is discuss the most recent situation in which you use illustration to provide an example to someone at home, at school, or at work. You just describe like a recent situation. One little trick here, and I know because students, anytime like you get asked a question about your personal life or giving some personal examples, people often tend to freeze or draw blanks. If you can't think of something off the top of your head and you're like, well, I need to answer this, I can't think of anything. Well, you know what's the cool thing is that you can kind of exaggerate some of these things and just make up something. It's like, well, for example, and you're like, okay, well, use illustration to provide an example at someone. You're like, well, what exactly is illustration? Again, illustration here is to prove a point using specific examples. So you can provide like, hey, I went to Coachella this weekend, and you wouldn't believe what I saw. Like there was this huge, I don't know, there was this like, can't even think of anything. But there's like this huge like firework event, right? And you start like, and you can start putting examples. The fireworks were like taller than like the New York State, the Empire State Building, and again, you use specific examples to start drawing things that can help you out. Or you can say, oh man, the song, like the whole event, it felt like I was, had a rush of adrenaline, just like when you're, I don't know, when you're doing something and you get that same rush, right? So again, look for different examples to help you make things. And again, a lot of people do this. And it's just like, for example, when you say, yeah, I remember using illustration at work to explain how it felt going to the dentist and getting a root canal done. It felt like, somebody was getting a nail and putting it through my teeth, something like that, right? Like hammering a nail through your teeth, right? You're using you're using like specific examples to prove a point, and other things like that too. Again, there's just so many ways you can use illustration to help you prove a point, and different examples that you can do that. So that's how you would start. Now, every week or every discussion, as you'll see, it's going to go to the next one. It's like, how to use narration. Like, give us an example of how we use narration to describe something at work or at school or at home. And then finally, it's going to wrap it up with, was your illustration effective? Why or why not? And sometimes we're like, well, we're not good. You can say, well, I'm not the best at telling stories, but they got the point after I provided enough examples. And just let us know. Now, your initial response here, again, always look at these because these may change. Your initial response should be at least 200 words in length. And again, you need to respond to at least 2 peers' posts. This is something that sometimes students forget to do, is they'll just do their initial post and they won't do a peer response. And then they wonder, well, why didn't I get the full points? Again, to get the full points, you need to do at least 2 peer responses on top of your initial post. And you have 200 words in length for your first post, and your peer responses should be at least 150 words in length. Another thing that I recommend is when you're looking to do a peer response, is look for somebody who has some similarities to you, because that's always like the easiest thing that you can do to kind of, compare your answer, your response to somebody else's, is look at what they're doing, and you're like, oh, I had a lot of the same ideas, and then again, you can help with that. When you're doing your discussion post too for your English class, your instructor does a fantastic job of giving you her own kind of example of what to do for your discussion, right? So take a look at it, like actually read it and see how she does answer the discussion itself, because this will also help you get an idea of what to do. And you can see, some students have already done this as well. So again, now when you're doing your discussion post, if you hit reply, just in case you didn't know, as soon as you start typing, you'll start seeing that you have the word count down here, right? So I know sometimes you're wondering, well, how many words do I have in my Canvas or my discussion? You can always check down here. One thing that I would recommend is that when you are doing these discussions, don't start them in your Canvas here. Write them in a Word document, write them on Google Docs, write them on your pages somewhere else where you can save it locally or on the cloud. Because what can happen sometimes is maybe you start writing and then you like pause and you go somewhere else, and maybe you come back within an hour, and then you're like, well, I can pick it up again and start writing. And then you hit post and it doesn't connect or something, or you have like a weird internet disconnection. Then Canvas will do its best to save it, but it's not always guaranteed. So rather than you spending X amount of hours or so on your discussion post to have it lost, I would recommend that, again, you write your discussion post first on something like Microsoft Word, Google Doc, Pages, which is locally on your MacBook, or on your notepad or something, just so you can save it in the case that something gets lost. Now, when you post a reply, for example, let me post this. This is just my sample. This is something else that you should also kind of take a look at. So say this is my entire post, right? I'm gonna hit post reply. Here, I'll see my post. Once you actually see it in the discussion post, then you know you're good. A couple of things that I would recommend too is making sure that, again, you can refresh the page and just make sure that it's there, because sometimes students, what they do is they'll hit post reply and they just exit out, or they close your computer and it doesn't actually post. So please be very careful when you're doing this stuff, because it does happen from time to time that you can do this. You know what? Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think first, before you can even see some of this stuff, is you have to post your writing first. So again, hopefully, again, if for some reason you see something or you see like you made an error and you need to make an edit, you can edit your post too. You can hit over here on the top right, you can hit these 3 dots and you can hit edit, right? But again, you should be able to get a pretty good idea. And I think you're right about that, which, like, for something like this, is we can probably see about putting this in the actual on the top part here, so you can get a better idea of it first. Now, the other thing is, as you can see, when I hit reply here, then this textbook pops up, or this text box pops up. Then you see this little green thing, right? This is called Grammarly. I love using this because it helps me with my writing, especially if I'm writing fast. And you can see that it'll start underlining words for me, right? Sometimes, like, say, for example, if I try to write, say if I try to write number. Let's see, hello. Sometimes you'll see it. Let's see if it does a good job. Or let's see. Here we go. So you can see it'll say, okay, do you want to write hi or how? And if I want to go ahead and change this, I can say how and You can correct this. This is a free Chrome extension. So if you go in your search browser and you do Grammarly or Chrome, you can go ahead and look for the extension here. Look for this one here. It says Grammar Checker and Writing App, right? So if I click this, and I can say, well, remove from Chrome because I already have it installed. But if you don't, it'll say add to Chrome. Then you just follow the steps. It'll add it, and you can refresh your page just like you see it here. And it makes a world of a different, like it just makes things so much easier, and it helps you so much when you're writing. Because again, even when you copy and paste from your Word doc or your Google Doc page onto your discussion post after you've done that, it'll pick up any errors that you need. There is a paid version, which is about $30 a month, which I think is for me personally, it's too much. But it does help you at that point with a bit more. Instead of just errors like grammatical errors, it'll also help you with sentence mechanics and structure. So again, just a cool little thing that you can use. So that was that discussion. And again, your initial posts are due by Wednesdays, and your peer responses are due by Fridays. Your second discussion post here. Now, just a heads up, and I know you're like, well, I have these two discussion posts. I have my discussion post for the computer class. I have my discussion post for math class, and I still have these review exercises. Well, just a cool little thing to note is that by the time you reach week 4, you actually only have one discussion and one review exercise. And just like in your math class, it also gets reduced to one practice exercise and one discussion. So your homework kind of simmers down a bit, because at the beginning, there's so much information that we need to have you understand, like all the foundational work that you need just to get prepared for the rest of everything else. Plus around, this time too, you're already starting for your midterms, you're studying for, or you're getting your papers together. So your homework overall kind of simmers down, but only because you have a lot of other things kind of floating around. So just keep that in mind. Like once you make this 3-week hump, things kind of, you should have a pretty good flow of everything, and things start to make a little more sense. So here in this second discussion, we have 2 parts for this one. We have review of verbs, which is, let's look at these. You're going to write 2 regular or irregular past tense verbs. And then you have this question: when do you use past/past perfect tense? How do you form the passive voice? When do you use the progressive form of verbs? And then you're going to write your own examples of the 3 types of conditional sentences. Then you have this question here: when should you add an S or an ES to verbs? And then finally, you have the question on what is faulty tense shift. Now, maybe you're like, well, I don't know any of these things. Well, lucky for you, in your textbook, again, you can use this magnifying glass to start looking up a lot of these things. Or you can look at your PowerPoints. Again, this is what they're here for. Like you have present and past tense, you have past participles, you have subject verb, you have tense consistency. These help you, but if you want to get more depth to this content, you can look up the keywords. For example, let's look at faulty tense shift. Again, I'm not going to go over all things here, but just so you have an idea of what to do. So here, let's look at this. It's on page 352. So when you write, the verb tense you use gives the reader an idea about the time when the event occurred, right? So a faulty tense shift occurs when you shift from one tense to another for no logical reason. And, I personally see this in a lot of students writing. So, try to be sure that you're always sticking with, that you have consistent tense. I don't know why I keep saying text. So here, let's look at this faulty tense shift. College reporter Erica Santiago interviewed a protester and asks, what about his political philosophy? Right? We have the issue with asks. Now here, let's look at the correct way. College reporter Erica Santiago interviewed a protester and asked about his political philosophy. And you're like, well, what do you mean? Like, how do you see this difference? Well, let's look at interviewed. Interviewed is in that past tense, right? So we want to make sure that this right here is also in the past tense. If this was present tense, so if we say college reporter Erica Santiago interviews a protester and asks about his political philosophy. So again, that the tense would be fine. But again, we're looking at interviewed. Again, that is past tense, and then you have asked. Again, that keeps it the same because there's no reason why you want to switch. Again, we have like here's another good illustration. During my childhood, I ate a lot of fast food. Today, I try to eat a healthy diet. Again, we have ate, which is the past, and we have present because again, and that works fine here, right? Because here we have during my childhood, so you know that's in the past, and then you have today, which is currently, which is present. So again, just make sure that you're looking at your verbs and you're looking at everything else too when you're looking at these faulty tense shifts. So again, you can look at each of these. Now, when you're answering these, let's see how your classmates have done this. So I'm always more for something like this, especially for your English classes. And this is something that I personally would ask you to do is write it. Now, something here that I would make is maybe try to separate into smaller paragraphs to kind of make it easier to read. And like this, I like this here because it makes it easy for your instructors to see, okay, well, this is all of part 1. This is all of part 2. And this is how you answer these, right? They give a nice little paragraph answering some of those questions. And then here are some 3 examples of conditional sentences and when you would add those. So I think that right there is something that, many of you can strive for because again, it helps with your organization of your discussion and it helps with just getting everything structured well and making sense of things, right? So you would go ahead and do this part. Now in the second part, it says provide a few examples of powerful descriptive verbs and discuss their effectiveness. Now we're also going to look at discuss the last time you used description to describe something or someone to a person at home, at school, or at work. Was your descriptive effective? Why or why not? Again, these are things that we've already looked up in your textbook. And as you see here, your initial post should be at least 200 words in length, and your peer responses should be at least 150 words in length. So again, be sure that you're actually looking at up these. Again, you can stick to your textbook and you can find stuff online. Now, the one thing that you need to keep in mind, and I believe by now your Comp 101 instructors should have probably mentioned this, is if you're getting information from a textbook that you want to reference, if you're getting information from a website or article that you also want to reference, again, please do not copy and paste things that you find online and just use them, because that is called plagiarism. I believe by next week or the week after, in your Comp 101 classes, you should be covering plagiarism, the different types and what they are. Because essentially it's like cheating. When you're using somebody else's work and not giving them credit, then again, you can get into a lot of trouble. The best thing that you should be doing in many of your discussions, especially if you start borrowing or you start referencing from somewhere else, is using something called references. And these should all be done in APA. Like I said, by now you should have a pretty, at least a somewhat basic or foundational understanding of what APA is, and kind of going over that. Now, we will be having an APA workshop next week, which will be covering a lot of the basics of what APA is, how you set up your papers, and how you set up your references, especially a lot of the in-text citations. Because again, if you want to copy and paste something, you can use something like quotes as long as you introduce your quotes right. But again, don't just be copying and pasting things from websites or anything else, or even your textbook, without providing proper in-text citations and proper references. But that is something that you should all aim to kind of do, because again, you're getting your information from somewhere, right? You're not subject experts in most of this content. So you should be able to put where you got it from and kind of help yourself out when it comes to that point. So again, let's kind of recap what we have for this week for your English class. You have your 2 discussion posts and you have your review exercise. Again, these 2, your initial responses are due by Wednesday before midnight. and you have your peer responses due by Friday before midnight. Again, you can work on, you don't have to wait until Wednesday to do your initial post. You can get it done by today. The sooner you get it done, the better. But again, you have to maintain, or you have to keep doing your work on time, right? So right now we're in week 2. If you haven't even started week 2 stuff and you're still stuck in week 1, you have to do week 2 things in order for you to have attendance for this week. Because if it turns into week 3 and you still haven't done anything for week 2, then technically that's considered an absence. So again, try your best to be on top of your assignments on their given weeks. Again, if you need help with your math, you can reach out to your math tutor at math@cnicollege.edu. You can also reach out to your math instructor too. I believe his name is Mr. Pierce, and I'll provide you with all their contact information with anything that you need. If you need help with your English class in terms of can you help me find what a paragraph pattern is and explain that better, you can reach out to our writing tutor at writing@cnicollege.edu. Now, also, if you do need help with research, doing in-text citations, APA, you could reach out to me at librarian@cnicollege.edu. Now, for the 2 other tutoring services that I mentioned too, I am included in those as well, but I would reserve that only if you cannot make it during the hours we have our other tutoring services. Again, the math tutoring is available Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., I believe. And your writing and English tutor is available Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to about, I believe Mondays it's 9 to 1. Wednesdays and Fridays, she is available from 9 to 2 o'clock, I believe. So if for some reason you cannot make those, then again, you can still email those, and I can see if I can help you out during those off days. But don't be afraid to reach out to your instructors. Your instructors are also here to provide you with support and with feedback too. So again, hopefully this helps you with kind of seeing what you need to do for this week in both of your courses. If you need anything else, feel free to reach out. Now, what I'm going to do is respond to some questions, if any.